is yet to conduct a review of program implementation in April 2025. So IMF is yet to do their review. But the minister, whose performance is to be reviewed, has already announced to the world that he has breached. The MPP is no longer in government. The NDC is in government. And so if there is a breach, it is not the MPP that has breached. It is the government of Ghana under President Mahama that has breached. I believe they don't know this. But ladies and gentlemen, is it not even surprising that the finance minister of a country will wish his country drilling an IMF program even before the IMF conducts a review? Yet, the same minister in the same budget projected foreign financing for his budget for the year to include $720 million from the IMF and $600 million from the World Bank. How come the government doesn't know that when Ghana fails a review, IMF review, because of the manipulated data they used, they will not receive the $1.3 billion from the IMF and the World Bank? How come they don't know that? And yet you go and put $1.3 billion in the budget that you receive from the IMF and the World Bank, and you are declaring that you have breached. And when you breach, the money will not be disbursed. So this already throws your budget off gear. So this budget cannot be a realistic budget. Ladies and gentlemen, do they even know that all the reliefs we got as a country from the debt restructuring we did with our Eurobond holders, with our bilateral official creditors, bringing us outright cancellation of almost $4 billion of our debts. Outright cancellation of almost $4 billion of the debts we owe them. And then $7.5 billion of debt service relief. If you put all of them together, we are talking about 12 billion United States dollars that the MPP government negotiated and got these reliefs for Ghana. But this is also tied to the IMF program. So breaching an IMF program means that you go back to the status quo before the debt restructuring. Are they aware of that? I believe they have been briefed, but they've ignored good advice. Do they even know that when all this happened, Ghana will be brought back to unsustainable debt levels and occasion an economic crisis? How will they fund the programs outlined in the budget then? How about investor credibility? On the 2025 fiscal framework, another baseless revelation in the budget is the projection of a sudden reduction in the commitment primary deficit from 3.9% of GDP in 2024 to a sudden primary surplus of 1.5% of GDP in 2025. I wish it were that simple to adjust by 5.4 percentage points between 1 year. I wish. It could be done. But this is not possible. And so again, their projection, our debt to GDP ratio was lower. But because we had to borrow so much to finance our COVID interventions, we had to borrow also to do to address the effect of the Russia-Ukraine war. We had to borrow for the financial cleanup exercise as well. The debt levels went to that 80%. And so if we have now brought it to the level better than the 2019 pre-COVID, it tells you that the NPP government has successfully brought Ghana's debt levels to accelerated, sustainable path. The least the NDC can do is to continue to implement our debt strategy. After all, what is the target of the IMF as far as our debt levels are concerned? The IMF projects Ghana to achieve a target of 55% debt to GDP in net present value terms by 2028. 2028. If by the end of 2024, we've already brought it down to 61.8%, then it means that it is not with just 6 percentage points to achieve the IMF target. And so the NDC government should be able to achieve this in the middle of this year, long ahead of 2028. But Gideon will tell you, the way they've started borrowing, the rate at which they are borrowing, we are very worried that they made declined 1.8%. Notes maturing in 2029 fell by 1%. 2028. But Gideon will tell you, the way they've started, international markets have not reacted towards Ghana. But in good conscience, we believe that the IMF will be fair to the Ghanaian people by holding on to the agreed method of computing the fiscal data during the review, as they did in all the previous reviews. Other than this, the Ghanaian people stand to suffer, and not the politicians, from these obviously bad political decisions. The Ghanaian people can recall that in the past, Ghana was fined $39 million for misreporting economic data to the IMF due to wrong data submitted by the NDC government led by President Rawlings, the former President Rawlings. It appears we are on our way there under another NDC government, under President Mahama. We wish to advise the Minister for Finance to tread cautiously in order not to derail our march to sustainable debt levels. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the manipulation of the fiscal data notwithstanding, the strong health of the economy the MPP handed to the new NDC government continues to be vindicated by other economic indicators. So even as they have manipulated the fiscals, there are other indicators that are evident of the work we did and our performance during the period of Akufo-Addo government. The debt to GDP ratio of 61.8%, as I mentioned earlier, achieved in 2024, was not by accident. It was due to skilled negotiation and the implementation of a good debt strategy. The Honorable Minister, if you watch him during the presentation of the budget, could not even acknowledge this important development by the imminent absence of this ratio in his budget speech. He couldn't even mention that amount of the debt levels in his budget speech. But we know that this is historic, and history will be kind to Akufo-Addo government. Another good news for Ghana was the announcement by the Ghana Statistical Service of a real GDP growth rate of 5.7% for the 2024 fiscal year. This is the highest in 5 years, the highest growth in 5 years since 2020. But the recovery from the global crisis had begun in 2023, when GDP growth surpassed 1.5% target to end the year at 3.1%. That was when the recovery began. The 5.7% growth in 2024 was more than the budget target of 3.1% and the revised budget target of 4%. The growth was led by industry for the first time in many years. For many years, the services sector led our growth. In 2024, for the first time in many years, industry led our growth. with a growth of 7.1%, followed by services at 5.9% and agriculture at 2.8%. This means that the Ghanaian economy has entered the phase of structural transformation, another historic development. This is what economists call structural transformation. You have the services sector leading, and then you have the industry overtaking. There has been a structural transformation of the economy, and this occurred again under the MPP government. Again, surprising to me, the minister tried to downplay this major achievement by attributing this growth to mining, which grew at 9.4%. He actually called it galamsey, which grew at 9.4%. However, what he doesn't know is that the same data from which he took the growth of the mining sector points out that the construction subsector grew by 9.6%, more than the growth in mining. So why couldn't he say that industry growth was led by construction sector? Yes, that's the statistical service data. And yesterday the statistical service said it. Why couldn't he say that? And manufacturing, after many years, grew by 3.9%. Manufacturing. It used to grow negative, 3.9% this time. In the services sector, we saw a notable growth of 15.8% in information and communications, largely due to the digitalization agenda implemented by Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Certainly, our economic growth story shows that growth was not a jobless growth. And that was why up to 2.3 million Ghanaians got employed under the MPP government. Unfortunately for the NDC, their growth strategy produced lower growth throughout President Mohammed's first term as president, and in particular, producing 4% growth in 2015 and 3.4%, a paltry growth, 3.4% in 2016. Curiously, ladies and gentlemen, with all the promises the NDC is talking about, programs they are talking about in the 2025 budget, curiously, this government is projecting to grow at just 4.4% in 2025. How could a reset economy, slow growth, following just a strong growth of 5.7% the year before? How could a reset
Like I said, I'm going to look at the fiscal sector for 2025, and that would involve the expenditures as well as the revenues that we voted in the budget. Let me begin by saying that it is interesting that the minister, in highlighting his fiscal policy strategy for 2025, uses phrases such as, "It is crucial that we establish macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability." A few months ago, the IMF concluded for the government to adjust macroeconomic policies and launch comprehensive reforms to restore macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability, while laying the foundation for higher and more inclusive growth. These efforts are paying off, with the growth recovering rapidly, inflation declining, although at a slow pace, and the fiscal and external positions further improving. End of the quotes. So clearly, we have laid a solid foundation for this government to operate. And so it is very disingenuous for them to create an impression as though we have bequeathed an economy full of problems. Let's come to the revenue numbers they showed in the 2025 budget. In 2025, the real growth of total revenue and grants, as we see in pages 132 of the budget and pages 134 of the budget, is just 0.2 percentage points. We left it at 15.9%. That is tax to GDP. We left it at 15.9%. And an economy that claims to be resetting is saying that I am only growing revenue by 0.2%. That is 16.1% of GDP. At the end of 2024, our revenue numbers were 186 billion Ghana cedis. And they want to grow it to 224 billion Ghana cedis in 2025. Like I said, the growth in real terms is not encouraging. But when you look, if you listen to the minister on Tuesday, in paragraph 173, the minister stated in the budget statement that they are projecting a tax revenue percentage of 17.2%. So clearly, two different figures are being shown here. But like I always say to people, the real details are in the budget. The real details are in the appendices of the budget. Minister in his speech says, I'm growing revenue by 17.2% of tax to GDP ratio. And then you come into the budget and it's 16.1%. Clearly, there's a problem with the credibility of our budget. Let me come to the expenditures as well. My minister, the former minister, made mention of a 24-hour economy, and so I will skip that. But let me say that when you compare our expenditures in 2024, when we had an election, usually with elections, the government spends so much because they have to give the Electoral Commission everything that they will need to conduct a free and fair election. So when you look at the appropriation for 2024, clearly with an election that was fully funded by government alone, the appropriation was 250 billion Ghana cedis. Here we are, NDC telling us that they want to cut waste, reduce, rationalize expenditure, and reduce the waste in the system. They are giving us an expenditure, an appropriation of 291 billion Ghana cedis. 291 billion Ghana cedis. No election. We are cutting down. So they say one thing, and the numbers in the budget speaks to something completely different. That also boils down to the credibility of the budget. Let me come to the uncapping that the minister spoke about. The expenditure measures of uncapping transfers to some statutory funds to enable them to fund other government programs. It's no-brainer. We have done it before. And so it's just continuing with what we also did. Every government has its discretion on how to fund its programs. While we cap the transfer to the statutory funds and use the cap transfers funds to fund free SHS and other programs, this NDC government has decided to uncap transfers to GET Fund so that GET Fund will fund free SHS. We have done it before. It is nothing new. We uncap and cap, and it's at the discretion of the minister. Where you find that you need to restore the capping, you restore it. And we did that in 2017 when we on social spending. These four social spending initiatives: capitation grants, and it's for social spending initiatives: capitation grants, NHIS, and 4 social spending initiatives: capitation grants, NHIS, and LEAP, and school feeding. So the Scholarship Secretariat, and a couple of other agencies, Maslock, SIGA, and the others. But here we are in 2025. When you look at the expenditure numbers, the compensation under OGM is 2.7 billion Ghana cedis. From 300.
Million cedis for goods and services for research department at the Office of Government Machinery. A4 sheets, printers, pens and papers, office at the Office of the Research Department. All of that 50 million cedis. And CAPES, 20 million cedis. Office of Government Machinery, Research Department, maybe a head and 2 or 3 assistants sitting in one office, 70 million cedis. This is a government that wants to cut costs. Again, The same appendix, we have government communication. This is Felix Oposukwache and Shamima Muslim. Government communication. They said they have collapsed Ministry of Information. They've saved money. Yet, under government communication, headed by Felix Oposukwache, deputized by Shamima Muslim, let's say they have 2 or 3 research assistants helping them, scrolling through social media, Ghana web, to see what is happening there to respond. The million. This is higher than about 3 or 4 ministries put together under President Akufo-Addo. This is higher than 3 or 4 ministries' budgets put together under President Akufo-Addo. This is the lean government Ghanaians voted for. I'll go to my main substantive issue. And I will briefly address the issue of debt and what the finance minister describes as an achievement by lowering the rate of the treasury bill market. And as we all know, the discourse surrounding Ghana's debt profile from 2009 to 2024 is both multifaceted and pivotal. Remember, under President Kufuor, we had HIPIC, and we were able to complete the HIPIC program, and that gave Ghana some external debt relief. This led to a significant decline in our public debt to GDP ratio. $0.7 billion in 2008 when President Kufuor exited. Under the NDC, for 8 years, Ghana's total public debt increased from $8.07 billion to $29.2 billion by the end of 2016. This in cumulative terms, represent an increase year were issuing Eurobond to the tune of $1 billion every year. And Ghana had to pay the highest interest rates on our Euro bonds ever in the history of this country. Of particular significance is the one they issued in 2014. And even the one they issued on the Ghana stock. Return on assets before annual growth of 5.4% in December 2023, 5% and 30.8% in December 2024. It is no secret, therefore, that the strength of an economy is also determined by the strength of its financial sector. And lastly, before the Venerable Kojo Oponkroma comes in, the minister talked about the treasury bill market and talked about the decline in the rates. And this is what he said: Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that our government's proactive fiscal management has yielded a significant reduction in T-bill rates. This achievement is testament to the positive shift in investor sentiment regarding our country's economic outlook. Now, if there's a reduction in T-bill rates, what is the common expectation of Ghanaians? The common expectation of Ghanaians is that if indeed it is supported by the economic fundamentals, it must translate in a lower cost of credit. Other than that, it becomes sticky downwards. But let's ask the minister. T-bill rates have reduced to say 19.0%. What has happened to cost of credit at the commercial level? Loans we are talking about. Now, despite the minister talking about this, there are interesting developments happening on the T-bill market. Anytime T-bill rates go down, all other things being equal, it must be commendable. However, there are questions to be asked as to whether or not these rates are artificially managed by the minister and whether or not they are sustainable. And we have to ask the question whether the minister is controlling both price and quantity on the T-bill market. And I ask these questions for two reasons. First, the decline in the treasury bill rate is not consistent with the fundamentals of the economy. We have inflation at 23.5%. We have monetary policy rate at 27%. How then can you have a treasury bill rate lower than the inflation? If it happens like that, it means that treasurers and commercial banks who are participating in the T-bill market are participating at a real return in the negative. Because when you go for T-bill and you are earning less than inflation, it means that there's a component that is eaten away by the inflation. So it doesn't make sense. No treasurer, all other things being equal, will go and buy T-bills, gives him a lower return, and then inflation consumes the whole thing. Negative real return. Why is it that the monetary policy rate is still at 27%? And why is it that inflation is above the treasury bill rate? And like I've said, a good treasurer will not do this. And if any good treasurer will not do this, don't we suspect artificial hands to bring down the T-bill rates for propaganda purposes? If this is generated by economic fundamentals, then the monetary policy rate is out in line with the market. Ideally, the central bank should bring down the monetary policy rate to where inflation is. If not, then there's something fundamentally wrong with the drops. If this is sustained and inflation is continuously above the T-bill rate, any rational treasury management will find solace in currency trading other than T-bills to give a negative return. And this disinflation process will dislodge. And a few days ago, you heard the governor of the Bank of Ghana cautioning the finance minister that the rate he's manipulating the T-bill rates to come down will affect the currency. And the governor is right, because if the banks after some time realize that the monetary policy rate is not coming down, inflation is not coming down, and they go for the T-bill rates and they will run at a loss, they will leave the T-bill market and go and buy currency, and that will put pressure on our cedi, and the cascading effect will be the transmission to inflation. The finance minister must understand this common economic principle, and I'm happy that the governor of the Bank of Ghana realizes this. Secondly, there appears to be what looks like the Bank of Ghana subordinating its monetary policy to fiscal policy, and that is dangerous. We all agree there's excess liquidity in the system. People are paid their coupons upon maturity from DDEP. People have cash in the system. When there's excess liquidity in the system, what happens? The Bank of Ghana, per the Bank of Ghana Act 2022, Act 612, and the Bank of Ghana Amendment Act 2016, Act 198, has the responsibility to ensure price stability. And the Bank of Ghana is the one that has the responsibility to mop up the excess liquidity from the system. How does the Bank of Ghana do this? The Bank of Ghana does this through the open market operations, the OMO. And when the Bank of Ghana goes to the market to issue the OMO is issued at monetary policy rate plus or minus 2%. So if monetary policy rate is 27%, let's assume the Bank of Ghana wants to do the lower end, minus 2%. That brings us to what? 25%. There is no treasurer or bank in the country who will go to the open market with Bank of Ghana offering 25%, a Ministry of Finance offering 19%, and decide to go for 19% and leave 25%. If you are a shareholder, will you agree to that? You won't agree. So the fact that the T-bill market that is offering lower rate is oversubscribed indicates that the Bank of Ghana is reneging on its responsibility to mop up the excess liquidity and subordinating that monetary policy arrangement to fiscal policy by the finance minister. And that is an arrangement this government has done, all because they want to tell the public that there's oversubscription and that there's confidence in the economy. No rational investor will do this. That is why we think that they have to really stop this and let the market take its own shape. Other than that, the consequences for the economy going forward will not be good. For us. And so this is what has to be done. And if you look at the T-bill market, the minister says, oh, they oversubscribe and they are borrowing less. Let's ask the minister. Every time they go to the T-bill market, they accept offers more than their target. They accept offers more than their target. If you take every week, what target they went to the market, they accept more offers more than the target. That should tell you there's something fundamentally wrong. And the minister says they want to open the bond market for the yield curve at the long end to have a lot of purchases. Everybody will move to the short end because they don't have confidence that going forward, the economy will assume the same trend as it is going. So they won't go to the long end. They will stay at the short end. And the minister is using the rates to entice the price and quantity, manipulating the system and controlling price and quantity. He determines how much price he wants to give, and he determines how much he wants to buy. And the Bank of Ghana is reneging on the monetary policy arrangement to go to the open market. And so when people go to the T-bill market, open market, Bank of Ghana is not there. Even if Bank of Ghana is there, it is accepting less. And they have the money. Investors are pushing them. Go and buy bills for us. So they all have to go to the T-bill. And that is what is forcing the rates now. It is not supported by the economic fundamentals. And we think this has to be dealt with. So in conclusion, and even before I conclude, Minister drew my attention to something. They complain about borrowing. That person said government has about 153 billion cedis in terms of interest payments on domestic markets to pay. That is why he says President Akufo-Addo has left with for him. And he's going to pay about 70 billion next year and the others 50-something billion the following year. If Akufo-Addo in 8 years has left you 153 billion as interest payments on the domestic market to pay, and in 2 months, you have borrowed 73 billion cedis from the domestic market. You say Akufo-Addo left you 153 billion in 8 years. But in 2 months, this finance minister has borrowed 73 billion cedis from the domestic market. In fact, today is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or today is Thursday. Tomorrow, Friday, the finance minister is going to borrow additional 6 billion from the domestic market, pushing it to over around 79 billion. Close to 80 billion in two months. And this debt whole of 2017, how much President Akufo-Addo borrowed from the domestic market was not up to 15 billion cedis. In 2 months, Atofo and President Mahama have done 73 billion cedis. We leave that to Ghanaians. And my senior brother, Kojo Nkrumah, will conclude for us.
Resources will go and therefore what results you will get. As was indicated, compensation alone at the Office of Government Machinery, 2.7 billion. And if you look at that particular appendix, total compensation for about 12 ministries put together is about 9 billion. And Jubilee House alone is taking 2.7 billion. A jump from the $126 that were the priorities are elsewhere. For those who are looking forward to efforts to halt further increases in electricity bills, they have been disappointed to note that electricity prices will rather be adjusted every quarter. The minister referred to it as the quarterly adjustment of utility tariffs. Every 3 months, light bills will go up. Now, this quarterly adjustment with no policy intervention from the NDC government will mean, as I mentioned, an increase in electricity tariffs every 3 months. Worse is that the government clandestinely removed the subsidies on gas that is made available to the IPPs. Remember, because government was subsidizing, the pricing was at about $7.8 per MMBTU. If you listen to the minister in the budget, he says gas prices have been increased. Why on earth will the government increase gas prices? He hid the fact. The fact is that government, the NDC government, has withdrawn the subsidy. And that is why the price has gone up now to $8.4 per MMBTU. This gas is what is used by the IPPs to produce power, and then they'll pass on the cost to us. So in effect, two things are happening. It's a double whammy. Not only are electricity prices going to go up every it will be going up at a higher rate from now. So there's no hope when it comes to the reset of energy pricing. Fuel price increase, for example, which influenced the choices of many drivers in the last election, also did not see a respite in policy direction. Contrary to the NDC's manifesto promise that they were going to to 5.7% by 2024, we're able to create a lot of space, and like Abuna mentioned, in the private sector expansion to create jobs, about 2.3, and they said it wasn't good enough. So the youth were looking forward to either high growth targets to create jobs in the private sector, like she mentioned, or at least government employment programs in the public service, so that they could also find jobs there. Unfortunately, neither of these two were expressed in the budget. In fact, if you look at paragraph 478 of the policy, and during this recovery, 5.7 by 2024, we're able to create 2.3 million jobs. The government, when it submitted its program to the technical experts, they have marked the government's program that growth would drop from 5 to be able to do more than that. So if growth was expected to go higher, then you could have been having hope that young people will find jobs in the expanded economy through the private sector. Despite their rhetoric, the facts are that the hope for jobs has been extinguished in this 2025 budget. There's no resetting here. Actually, the situation will most likely get worse. We are wondering now whether this is the reason for which the government deliberately dismissed or terminated thousands of young people because they knew they were going to freeze new recruitments. Is this the reason for which they deliberately dismissed thousands of young people so that they could create an artificial set of vacancies to placate a few of their supporters who will still be expecting jobs when they come to office? While improving the job creation ecosystem is a problem, it is alarming, however, that they have elected a set of priorities to move the money elsewhere. And that's what we've already outlined to you, moving the money to Jubilee House, moving the money to OGM and other places. Infrastructure, and I'll end of these few ones. Infrastructure investments are known to be a key if you want to open up, grow the economy, create more jobs. Unfortunately, however, the government has failed in making the necessary budget allocations to give meaning to even their own planned infrastructure program. Their planned infrastructure program is what? The big push. $10 billion. If you prorate it over 4 years, that's about 2.5 billion cedis or $2.5 billion per annum. You will expect that if the government itself is serious about its own big push, they will at least make available $2.5 billion in their first budget when they have all the goodwill and the credibility. If you go into the fiscal tables, it's only $800 million, less than $1 billion. In effect, ladies and gentlemen, the big push itself needs a push. Else, nothing meaningful will happen in their infrastructure program. And finally, even more worrying is the Agenda 101 project, which many districts are looking forward to. It appears to be heading for a halt. Budget allocations for its continuation appear elusive. The dedicated source of funding, and you remember they misbriefed the president that there was no dedicated source of funding, that you needed $1.7 billion more to finish, and that only one had been completed. Even the brief they gave the president was not correct. 3 had been completed and commissioned. Already 400 million had been paid, so it wasn't 1.7 billion. And the claim that there was no dedicated source of funding wasn't true. The dedicated source of funding was Gift Health, which was receiving funds from the CAPEX allocation of the annual budget funding amount. Now they've constrained it, as the government is signaling that they will cut funding to GIF. Furthermore, no clear alternative financing has been identified in the budget to fund the project. And this is truly worrying, ladies and gentlemen. Not only is this contrary to the NDC's promises to health workers, you will recall that they will continue the project. You recall President Mahama, then candidate Mahama, promising the nurses that don't worry, we'll continue the projects and finish them and employ you in them. Now, you are realizing that this is becoming an illusion. Not only is it worrying, not only is it contrary, but abandoning these projects or giving them out as franchises, like the president mentioned when he came to Parliament for SONA, will jeopardize the efforts at universal health coverage. The millions of citizens in remote districts who are looking forward to their lives being saved from this healthcare intervention are now at risk. Mr. President, we beg you in the name of God, please do not abandon the Agenda 111 project for political reasons. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the 2025 budget does not offer any real reset. It does not offer any hope. Unfortunately, it will worsen the cost of living, it will worsen the unemployment situation, and it will worsen the rate of infrastructure development in our country. We thank you for your attention this afternoon, and we'll take a few questions.
Yes, please. We are going to take 4 questions. And then Honorable Kojo Ponkruma would do a summary of all of this in Twi, so that the sister stations running Twi programs can take them up. Please, are we okay? So please, yes. What's your name and station?
want to find out from the very day the finance minister presented the budget. The press conference, we heard him say the FPP government never received any tax. Only what we want to put out instead of that.
Yes, Doc, would you want to take the questions first? Though?
Okay.
So please, you have to take your seat.
Yeah, so come.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's take all questions while we wait.
Yes.
So, yes, what's your name and which station or media?
The big push, how best should it be implemented? Looking at what you said.
Okay, so can I have a lady? Just about Saturday, we had the International Women's Day, so I'm minded to implement the.
No, you're not ready.
Are you a he for she? No, are you a he for she?
Yeah.
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, just I want to find my name is Felix. Yeah, but I want clarity on the energy sector. The government thinks that left behind the debt of 1.7 billion in the IPPs and 68 billion to supply. Can you clarify why?
1.7 billion to IPPs.
Last question. If we don't have, then that should be.
Cities,
I want a lady, please.
cities or what?
Ladies,
$1.7 billion.
ladies. Okay, then that should be all.
Maybe I think went down well.
So, Dr. Amin will take the first question on the. Task.
Well, I think that my job is cut